Welcome to Illo Talk. I am Cory Kerr, and this is episode 176. Illo Talk is my vlog where I talk about the creative life, illustration, design, and personal projects and whatnot. And in the last video, I announced at the end that we just got matched with the baby to be adopted. And so we're super excited. We have been trying to get pregnant for about 7 years, and that didn't work at all. And there were surgeries and procedures and things, and it was all weird. None of it panned out. So we thought we'd try this, and it worked out really well. So in July, we're gonna have a baby. We've been talking to the mom and the prospective mother, and she's super nice and super excited about it, and it's been great. It's been really good. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. I don't know, there's not going to be much news for the next couple months because my wife isn't pregnant, and so it's a pregnancy that's not here, somewhere else. Anyway, so kind of strange. Anyway, I have had a fairly productive week, and so I just wanted to show you some of the things that I did. So I did things like this. I'll show you this page real quick. This page on the left here is this page over here is a page that I already finished a long time ago. But one of the problems was that I was doing this as single pages rather than thinking about it in spreads, because I was thinking about it like a comic where you're not sure which page the advertisement is going to go on, so you treat each page independently. But in actuality, when I started actually doing some study and got some feedback from my mentor, I thought I need to do this in spreads. And so what I did is I have started to turn some of these single pages into double page spreads. And so all of this over here is going to be black, and I'll kind of fill that in. And so I was working on 11 by 17 before, and now I am working on two 11 by 17 pages taped together. And so it's even more. There's this one that I just finished, and so I did it as a double page spread, and so I just want to show you some of the details of this because I really like how the tree bark turned out. I got some of those plants and leaves and little vines and moss and whatnot kind of chilling out there. Not a huge fan of how the leaves are looking, but you know, overall pretty good. Come to the birds there. So anyway, so this is moving right along, and I'm knocking out a number of pages. This one was fairly easy to turn into a double page spread because as I mapped it out, I really needed to have some room over here. And so all I really needed to do is just kind of extend that silhouette underneath there, and then I can have some text on this page, kind of let it breathe a little bit. So some of them don't take that long. Like that took me, all of like 10 minutes. Oh yeah, so this page is going to be really easy to turn into a two-page spread because I just have to like go like that, and the rest of the page is going to be black. And this is kind of the spot in the story where the villain gets her comeuppance. And spoiler alert, there's monsters in the box. So if you're given a box by a magical creature in a fairy tale and they tell you don't open the box, don't open the box. Not a good idea.
So I wanted to talk about time. And while I talk about time, I think one of the reasons I want to talk about time is I think there is a false perception of how quickly things get done and how much time things take. And so on one side of the screen, I'm going to show you what I don't normally do because, I don't know, I just can't imagine that it would be very exciting, but this is inking in real time. It's not sped up. It is not, this is every stroke as it happens, real time. One of the reasons that I don't do live streaming is because, I don't know, I just think that for whatever reason, people want to get things fast. They want to see it, develop quickly, and there's some sort of magic that happens when you watch things in real time. So on the other side of the screen, you're going to see much of what I'm creating sped up considerably. And so you can watch either side of the screen while I talk about time. But there's a couple of things that got me interested in talking about this. I was listening to a book by Todd Henry called Die Empty. One of my favorite books, really, really quite good. Talking about, not dying an empty husk, but like living without regrets. And one of the things that he says in there is that the most expensive land on the earth is the graveyard, because that's where all of the novels that were never started, and the comic books, that were never finished, and the screenplays that were never written, that's where they lie. That's where all of the creative ideas that were not implemented, all of the entrepreneurial endeavors that never got off the ground, that's where they all end up. And so this idea of death is fascinating. In Troy, Brad Pitt's character is explaining why the Greek gods are envious of the mortals, and it's because death adds value, because it adds risk, it adds a limitation, it adds the ability to achieve something in a limited or short period of time. And if you look at Stephen Pressfield in his book, The War of Art, he also talks about beings outside of time. He calls them angels, but he says that you can, in different cultures they called them different things, whether they be the muses, or a genius, or, inspiration or whatever. That these ideas, these projects that we all feel compelled to work on, symphonies and books and illustrations and whatnot, they all exist outside of time, but can't be realized until they're brought into something, into a realm that is bound by time, and that's the only time that they can actually have corporeal form. It's kind of an interesting concept that the inspiration stream is out there, but it can only be tapped into by people who are willing to make the sacrifice to do so. So if you look at things like the root word of actually, I don't want to get into etymology. I want to talk more about time. So anyway, if you're looking at passion, this is what I'm going to say. I'll just say it really fast. Passion or compassion, it means to suffer with, or to suffer for. And so instead of looking at passion as this fleeting emotion, or passion as this idea of something that, I just have to do this because it just brings me such joy and ecstasy and whatever. And that's kind of what passion has evolved into. But passion came from the idea of something that you are willing to suffer for. Like, what is it that you're willing to sacrifice for? That's kind of that thing. But anyway, beyond that, Steve Jobs was giving a commencement talk at a graduation, and he was talking about death. He was talking about how he really started to do well in his career once he was diagnosed with this kind of cancer, and he realized that this phrase that somebody had told him one time, where you should work every day as if it's your last, because someday that will become true. And if you're working every day as if it's your last, and you put in a good, honest day's work and all that jazz, then, if you die the next day, then you'll feel great about that. Todd Henry kind of points out something really interesting in the book Die Empty. He's like, you can't go with this idea of live every day as if it's your last, because if you know that you were dying tomorrow, you wouldn't go to work. You wouldn't go into like the drudgery of the office. And if you're working on a 300-page graphic novel, or even for me, like a 36-page or whatever this is, I don't know, something like that, children's book, and I'm like halfway through it, would I draw one more page? No, I wouldn't. I would spend time with my family. I would hang out with my friends. I would, waste the day away relaxing, and I wouldn't, maybe I would jot down some words of wisdom or cut one last video, but I wouldn't work on a long form project. And so this idea that you should live every day as if it's your last is not a useful way to live. Now, the idea of existentialism, which I really like, is that death is a fact of life, and death is something that brings value to life, in that the fact that it ends means that you have a limited amount of time, and that life and time on this earth is a limited resource. And so, like all limited resources, the law of scarcity comes into play, and how we spend our time and the behaviors that we take and the actions that we take largely determine the value of the life that we live. And so, if I were to die tomorrow, would I look back and regret not playing 6 hours of video games the night before? Probably not, but finishing the last page of a book, wrapping up a project, spending time with my family, teaching, doing things where I live without regret is different than living as if every day was my last. And so I take actions, or try to, and I don't always succeed at this. I'm trying to talk about this on here so that I can kind of work out some of the things that I'm thinking about, but or struggling with. I don't live without regrets. I have regrets, but I try to make decisions, and I try to decide to do things based on the fact of, will it matter a year from now? And if it matters a year from now, then it's important. And there are things that there are acts of commission and acts of omission. Things that I can omit from my life that in the not doing of them, it will matter in a year from now, whether that is for good or for ill. And there are things of commission where if I do them, it will matter a year from now, for good or for ill. For example, I didn't draw until I was in my mid-30s, or early 30s, and I wish that I could have had several decades back. Every year that I didn't draw, it did matter a year later in a negative light. It was another year lost. And now that I'm drawing, pretty much every day, I don't go to bed at night thinking, oh, I wasted today. Because I'm another day ahead. I'm another day further down the road of becoming a better illustrator and a better artist and a better storyteller. And every time I advance a project forward, even if that advancement is a failure, I do a page that I've got to scrap, I go down a road that doesn't pan out, even that effort to move things forward is something that I can feel good about, and that I can have some level of pride or some level of satisfaction in. And so this idea of this limited amount of time that we have here and spending it wisely. Like, let's say that you had, for example, here's a good example. At one point in time in college, I had $6 to my name, and I had no job prospects, no way to make any money. I had no access to credit. I didn't know that credit was a possibility. And so I had half a case of tuna that one of my aunts had given me. And so I took that $6 and I walked to the grocery store and I bought 4 different types of mustard, different flavors of mustard. And I made that $6 last for 6 weeks. Just draining stuff out of these tuna cans and then filling it with a different flavor of mustard to give me a little bit of variety. And so I could have gone to the movies. I could have bought a couple candy bars or whatever, but because I had an exceptionally limited amount of resources, how I used those resources was significantly important. At another point in time in college, I the secretary that was supposed to do the paid, the hours or whatever, like forgot to turn in my hours, and so I had to last 2 weeks without any cash because I was living paycheck to paycheck at the time. I was an art model, and I was not getting paid a lot of money to pose for figure drawing. And in any case, I needed every dime, and so I went 2 weeks, and I found out that you can live on $1.11 a day if you buy a big 10-pound bag of pancake batter, and you have 3 pancakes, 3 meals a day with peanut butter syrup and a glass of milk. That I could do that for $1.11 a day. Of course, that was what, 15 years ago, so it's probably a little bit more now. But with limited resources, the choices that you make become significant. If I had an infinite amount of money, it wouldn't matter what I bought. I could buy anything. I could waste money. I could spend it on anything and be frivolous, and it's not as important. When something becomes infinite, it loses value because of the law of scarcity, right? And so each dollar that I spent during those times where I had limited resources was significantly more valuable and more important, the decisions that I made and how I spent that money. And the same is true with time. The interesting thing with time, though, is we don't know how long we have on this earth. And so since we don't know how long we have on this earth, we know that our time is limited, but we don't know how limited it is. And so it's important, instead of saying, oh, I've got plenty of time, I can do this tomorrow, to think of it more like, I have a limited amount of time, and I don't know how limited that is. I could live for another 40 to 50 years, or I could die tomorrow, but I need to live my life understanding that the time that I have is limited. And so you spend it with family, you spend it with friends, and you spend it creating. I think creating things is important. I don't actually anticipate ever being known or being famous for the work that I do, but I will have a body of work that lives beyond me. I will leave a body of work that will be that will live on beyond when my time runs out. And with the limited time that I have, I will create something eternal, and the fact that it could be republished and reprinted, and it doesn't need blood or breath to continue to survive. It just needs to have been created. And so it's kind of an interesting thing, this idea of time. And I think intrinsically everybody understands the value of time, and I wonder about time-lapse videos, because people see something develop in several minutes that took 10 hours or an hour or whatever, and your hand hurts and your back hurts, and there's the 4 or 5 years it took you to get good enough up until that point to be able to do it even at that speed and at that quality. And it's spent so quickly and consumed so quickly in these speed videos. And yet the speed videos are very interesting, and from the standpoint of somebody who is trying to teach himself based off learning off of other artists and seeing how everybody else does things, the speed videos are fascinating, because I can see the decisions they make fast and the results of those decisions quickly, whereas if I was watching in real time, I might miss out on some of those things. So anyway, just an interesting couple of things that I've been thinking about is the time we have on this earth and why we spend it on different things. And I wonder a lot about people that don't create. And I wonder if they just haven't thought about the limited amount of time that they have. Because the things that we tend to do other than create often tend to be things that are not significant, as if you have an unlimited resource, an unlimited amount of time. Because if you were immortal, then binge watching a crappy show isn't a waste of time. because if you're immortal, you have nothing but time to waste. It's literally not a limited resource. And I like TV shows, and I like movies, and I watch them often and listen to them. And I consume a lot of entertainment, and I like entertainment. And I don't think that our lives should be made up of all work and no entertainment. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand that our mortality in this life is one of the things that drives us and causes us to spend our limited resource of time well. And at least a portion of that needs to go towards creating things that will outlast you. And I don't think that they have to be important or significant in that they're going to change the world or, whatever. It's not a Bill and Ted thing where we're going to write a song that creates world peace necessarily, but I think creating entertainment, and I think creating things that make people think, and I think creating things of beauty and of value are important, and I think they're significant. So, anyway, that's just some random thoughts about time that I've been thinking about lately. Because I've been really trying to figure out the difference between people that wish for things. I wish that I could create. I wish that I could draw a comic. I wish that I could write a book. I wish that I could do this. This is another thing that Todd Henry brought up in his book Die Empty. Is he talked about this woman who created this giant mural. I can't remember where it was, but a huge mural. And it said, "Before I die, I will." And then she did this big grid, and she left markers out so that people could fill the space. And she didn't know what people would do, but then people started filling the space with the things that they wanted to do before they died. And there's kind of this idea of a bucket list, right? And I was listening to this audiobook, and my daughter, who's 8, said, "Dad, what's on your bucket list that you're not doing?" And I really thought about it really hard, and my wife thought about it, and excuse me, and we both kind of answered the same thing, like, I'm doing the things that I want to do. I can't think of anything necessarily on my bucket list that I'm not currently working on. And that was kind of the point, is when you're faced with your own mortality, when you're faced with this idea, and this is another Stephen Pressfield thing from The War of Art. He talks about a guy who's an oncologist who deals with cancer patients. And he says that these people get cancer, and then immediately they start to paint, or they start to do whatever, or they reconcile with loved ones or whatever. And the reminder, the wake-up call of their limited resource of time on this earth kicks them into gear so that they begin to live life more abundantly and more full than they were before, when they didn't realize and were unaware of the limited nature of time. And he said that in a lot of these cases, that is actually one of the things that helps them get better and live longer, and sometimes beat the cancer, or it goes into remission, is because they tend to have a reason to live and begin spending their life and their limited amount of time well. And I think you could take that analogy to some illogical extremes, saying that people that get cancer deserve it, or that they're whatever. And I don't think that's true. I think that's crap. But it is an interesting thing that when you think about the fact that we're not going to be here forever, you can get to the point where you really start to realize the type of things that you're working on. And so I think a year is a good increment of time to think about. And it's that difference between urgent versus important. The urgent things, feel, significant. They feel like you have to deal with them. But the important things rarely feel like that, and they feel like you can put them off. And important things are things that require an investment of time, and they're inconvenient. and you have to fight for them. There's another book that I haven't read yet, but the idea of the book is talking about the 4 stages of creativity. And you have the explorer who kind of wanders and explores and experiments and tries new things, and this is where like play comes in. And then you have the judge who comes in and decides which of the explorer's things has value and merit to kind of move forward. And then you have the artist who executes the ideas of the judge. And then you have the warrior who throughout the process protects that idea so that it stays good and fights for it. And I find it interesting that all 4 of those stages involve this idea of living life to the fullest, of deciding what has value and enjoying life and experimenting and fighting for what's good and executing things and creating things. And all of those things are important. And very few of them will ever feel urgent, because the urgent things need to be taken care of right now. But the important things can wait till tomorrow, until you realize that you have a limited amount of time and that you need to spend your time wisely because it's limited. So anyway, so there's some existentialism mixed in with some pop psychology and some self-help books and my own random musings kind of put together while I draw stuff. So enjoy. Go spend your time wisely. And I'm curious what you guys think. I'm curious, those of you that are spending your time creating things, why you do that. Does it have to do with time? Does it have to do with satisfaction or fulfillment? Does it have to do with a drive for fame or success? What is your motivation for that? Yours might not be as morbid or weird or existential as mine, but it could be as well. And I'm curious. Anyway, if you want to check out my stuff, you can see the things that I'm making that will hopefully live on beyond me at corykerr.com. And you can check different things out. And I will be getting older soon. My birthday is in a week or so, and I will age again and approach older years, which is probably why I'm thinking about some of this stuff. You can always sign up for different things, and I've got all that stuff there at corykerr.com, and you can check that out. And if you want to support this channel, then like and comment on these videos and share them with other people. And we will catch you guys later. I'm out.